A currency is not just paper, it is the heartbeat of a nation's dignity. For decades, the economic lifeblood of West Africa was drained by a monetary system designed in a distant capital rather than on this very soil. But the seasons of dependency are ending. In the middle of 2026, the winds of change are blowing from the heart of the Sahel as the Alliance of Sahel States takes the final decisive steps to bury the old currency and launch a new destiny. Can a continent truly be free if it does not own the ink in its own ledger? The cage is opening before our very eyes. Stay with us. This is more than a financial update. It is the sound of chains breaking. Subscribe and stand with us as we witness the birth of a new African dignity. As the sun rises over the savannah, a new kind of power is being forged, not in the heat of battle, but in the quiet strength of the vault. From the fields of Mali to the markets of Niger and the gold mines of Burkina Faso, the message is clear. Under the unyielding vision of leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, the land of upright men is finally reclaiming its wealth. We are standing at the threshold of a revolution that will rewrite the global map forever. For over 60 years, a ghost has haunted the markets and the banks of West Africa. It is a ghost that carries a French name and a colonial heart, a currency designed to keep the wealth of the continent on a short, invisible leash. The CFA Franc was the final bar of a cage that many thought would never open. It was a system where the value of a man's labor was decided in a boardroom thousands of miles away, and where the reserves of the land were locked in vaults that did not belong to the people. But the dawn of 2026 has brought a fire that no old empire can extinguish. The Alliance of Sahel States is no longer just a military pact. It is becoming the architect of a new financial reality. The announcement of the Common Central Bank for Mali, Niger, and the Sahelian heartland was not just a policy update, it was a declaration of war against dependency. In the quiet, determined rooms of the transition governments, the ink is being used to sign away the chains of the past. The plan is clear, the roadmap is set, and the destination is absolute monetary sovereignty. We are witnessing the birth of a new African currency, a medium of exchange that finally speaks the language of the people who earn it. Whether it is called the Sierra or the Sahel, the name matters less than the blood that will flow through this new economic vein. For too long, the narrative was that Africa was too fragile to manage its own coins. They told us that without the stability of the colonial anchor, our economies would drift into the abyss of inflation and chaos. But Ibrahim Traoré and his brothers-in-arms have looked at the history books and seen a different truth. They have seen that true stability is found in self-reliance, not in the permission of a former master. The creation of the AES Central Bank is the first beat of a new heart, an institution that will serve the farmers, the miners, and the entrepreneurs of this vast region, rather than the interests of foreign treasuries. This is the ultimate stage of the revolution. You can reclaim your land, you can expel foreign troops, and you can rewrite your laws. But if you do not own your money, you are still a tenant in your own house. The transition from the CFA Franc is a movement from the darkness of the old cage toward the blinding light of the wings of freedom. It is a recognition that the sweat of a worker in the Sahel is worth exactly what the soil of the Sahel provides, not what a European central bank dictates. The philosophy is simple. We will no longer beg for the right to use our own wealth. The logistical movement behind this shift is massive. Across the three nations, the infrastructure for a unified financial system is being laid with the precision of a military operation. This is not a hasty retreat. It is a strategic advance. The centralization of resources and the harmonization of trade laws are the foundation stones of a bridge that will connect the past to a future of our own making. The leaders are not just printing paper. They are forging a new social contract with their citizens. They are promising that for every hour of work, there will be a reward that stays within the community, building schools, hospitals, and roads that we own. Metaphorically, we are moving from a desert of scarcity to a harvest of plenty. The old currency was a dry well that only gave water to those who held the key. The new currency is a river that we have diverted to water our own fields. The pride felt in the streets is palpable. In the markets of the capital and the small stalls of the border towns, the talk is no longer about the exchange rate in Paris, but about the strength of our own union. This is the sound of a continent waking up, rubbing its eyes, and realizing that the keys to the cage were in its hands all along. The birth of this currency is an act of supreme courage. It is an invitation to every African nation to look at their own pockets and ask who truly owns what is inside. It is a message to the world that the era of the imported model is finished. We are planting our own seeds in our own soil, and we are prepared to defend the harvest with everything we have. The economic map of West Africa is being redrawn, not with the lines of colonial treaties, but with the paths of trade and solidarity that have always existed beneath the surface. As the first designs of the new notes are discussed and the digital ledgers are opened, the weight of history is heavy in the air. This is a moment that will be remembered for a century. It is the moment the lion stopped asking for crumbs and started building its own storehouse. The transition is inevitable, the momentum is unstoppable, and the old order is trembling. But as the printing presses prepare to roll and the vaults are readied, a vital question remains. Money is only as strong as the promise behind it. In a world of shifting values and global pressure, what will the Alliance of Sahel States use to ensure that their new currency is not just paper, but a fortress of real, unshakable value? For decades, the world was told a convenient lie, that African wealth was merely an abstract concept, a series of digits on a glowing screen in a city across the ocean. We were taught to believe that our resources only gained value once they were blessed by a foreign exchange, and that our dignity was a currency too volatile to be trusted. The old system was a masterpiece of absurdity, requiring us to ship the very gold of our ancestors to a distant seller just to prove we were worthy of credit. It was a cycle of humiliation, where the owner of the house had to ask a stranger for permission to use his own basement. But the climax of this financial drama is reached when the people finally realize that the vault is not in Paris. The vault is beneath their own feet. This is the point where the mirage of the paper empire meets the hard reality of the African soil. The new currency of the Alliance of Sahel States is not being forged out of thin air or backed by the hollow promises of global financial institutions that have spent 60 years profiting from our debt. It is being anchored by the weight of the yellow metal and the density of the minerals that define our geography. In the heart of the Sahel, gold is no longer just an export. It is the solid bone of a new economic body. By using the natural riches of the land, the gold of the hills and the uranium of the desert, to guarantee the value of their money, these nations are performing an act of supreme alchemy. They are turning the physical sweat of the miner into the permanent sovereignty of the citizen. The emotional peak of this revolution is felt in the simple act of looking at the ground. For the first time in a century, the wealth of the motherland is staying home. The indignity of the past, where our reserves were held hostage to ensure our stability, is being replaced by a fierce and unyielding pride. We have moved from the indignation of being robbed in broad daylight to a state of profound hope. The message from the leadership is clear. Our dignity is the true gold of our soul, and our resources are the guarantor of our children's future. There is a deep and resonant satisfaction in knowing that when a worker in Ouagadougou or Niamey holds a note in their hand, that paper is a direct representative of the very earth they walk upon. Ibrahim Traoré has often spoken of the slaves of the mind who believe that Africa cannot survive without a European anchor. But this new financial architecture is the ultimate antidote to that mental poison. The captain and his counterparts are not just changing the name on the money, they are changing the source of its power. They are shifting the foundation of the economy from the shifting sands of foreign approval to the bedrock of local production. This is the indigenous harvest of the financial world. It is the moment we stop planting foreign debt and start reaping African value. The philosophy is simple. If the soil provides the wealth, the soil should provide the backing. The contrast between the old and the new is as stark as light and shadow. The old currency was a symbol of pity, a mechanism that allowed others to dictate the tempo of our development. The new currency is a symbol of partnership, a tool that allows us to negotiate with the world from a position of strength. We are no longer begging for a seat at the table. We are building a table out of the very timber and ore that others once took for granted. The regret for the decades spent in the waiting room of history is being burned away by the fire of this newfound agency. Every ounce of gold refined within our borders is a brick in the fortress of our independence. This is the point of no return. By backing their currency with the physical reality of their own resources, the nations of the Sahel are insulating themselves from the whims of a global system that has never had their best interest at heart. They are creating a financial shield that is as resilient as the people themselves. The energy in the streets is electric, a mixture of the ancient pride of kings and the modern grit of revolutionaries. They realize that they are part of a moment that history will record as the day the lion stopped using the master's coins and started minting its own destiny. But this act of defiance has not gone unnoticed. In the quiet, high-walled gardens of the old world, the masters of the previous order are watching the rise of this gold-backed threat with a growing sense of panic. They know that if the Sahel succeeds, the rest of the continent might wake up and realize that the keys to their own cages have been buried in their own backyards all along. The air is thick with the scent of an impending storm, a clash between the empire of paper and the sovereignty of the soil. As the first bars of domestic gold are moved into the new national vaults, a sense of holy purpose takes hold. This is the moment when the physical and the political become one. The currency is ready, the backing is solid, the people are united. But as the new system begins to breathe, the pressure from the outside world is reaching a fever pitch, and the first cracks of a different kind of war are beginning to show on the horizon. The transition from a colonial shadow to a sovereign dawn is not a journey measured in miles, but in the quiet confidence of a mother buying bread for her children. When the ink of the old empire is finally washed away, the first place the change is felt is not in the grand halls of a central bank, but in the vibrant, dusty markets where the heartbeat of the nation resides. For 60 years, the people lived under the weight of an invisible hand that reached across the ocean to dictate the price of their sweat. Today, that hand has been withdrawn, and the people are learning to hold the pen of their own destiny. The shift to a new currency is the ultimate act of reclaiming the household. It is the moment when the father of the house finally holds the keys to his own granary. In the bustling trade hubs of Burkina Faso, the atmosphere is one of focused transformation. The easing of the old monetary constraints has allowed for a new kind of economic oxygen to flow through the streets of Ouagadougou and beyond. We are no longer waiting for a signal from a distant capital to know if our harvests are worth the effort of the planting. Under the new system, the stability of the currency is tied directly to the stability of the soil and the grit of the people. This is the seed of local investment, planted in a ground that is no longer being drained by foreign interests. When the value of the currency is backed by the gold refined within our own borders, the inflation that once haunted the poor becomes a dragon we have the tools to slay ourselves. This financial revolution is weaving a new tapestry of connection between the brothers of the Sahel. The borders that were once lines of division are becoming bridges of common interest. By sharing a single currency, Mali, Niger, and the land of upright men are creating a regional engine of prosperity that is resilient to the whims of the global north. It is a movement from a state of scattered weakness to a position of collective strength. The road to a unified African market is being paved with the very notes that carry the images of our heroes and the symbols of our resources. We are no longer three separate victims of a colonial legacy. We are a single, formidable force of economic self-determination. However, the path of the pioneer is never without its stones. The indignation of the past, where our hard-earned savings were devalued by the decisions of strangers, still leaves a bitter taste in the mouth. But that bitterness is being replaced by a fierce, protective pride. We must ask ourselves, would you trust a currency backed by the solid gold of your own soil more than one controlled by the shifting paper of a distant capital? Does true security come from the permission of a master or from the strength of your own harvest? I invite you to share your vision in the comments below. Is the future of Africa written in gold, or is it still being whispered in foreign boardrooms? The political consequences of this shift are as profound as the economic ones. The transition government has used this newfound financial agency to fund projects that were once deemed impossible by the experts of the old world. Irrigation systems, local processing plants and schools are rising from the earth, funded not by debt that will enslave the next generation, but by the wealth that we have reclaimed. This is the indigenous harvest of governance, where the needs of the citizen are the only priority. The era of the client state is finished. The era of the sovereign partner has begun. The pride in the eyes of the youth is the most valuable asset in the national vault, a wealth that can never be seized or sanctioned. But as the new system begins to take root, the old world is not sitting idly in the shadows. They see the rise of a gold-backed African power as a threat to the very foundation of their paper empire. They know that if the Sahel can prove that it does not need their stability, the rest of the continent will begin to ask why they are still paying rent to their former landlords. The whispers of financial retaliation and the threat of global isolation are beginning to gather like storm clouds on the horizon. The battle for the soul of the African economy has moved from the streets to the digital ledgers and the international trading floors. The people of the Sahel are under no illusion that this road will be easy. They know that to walk in dignity is to walk against the wind. But they also know that a house built on its own rock can withstand any tempest. Every transaction made in the new currency is a vote for independence, a statement that the era of being a laboratory for foreign theories is over. We are the architects, we are the builders, and we are the owners. The hope that is rising is not a fragile dream. It is as solid as a bar of bullion and as enduring as the sun. As the first notes of the new currency begin to circulate through the hands of the farmers and the artisans, a sense of historic justice settles over the land. The cage is open, and the bird is finally testing its wings. But the sky is large, and there are many who would see the bird fall before it reaches the clouds. The pressure from the international financial institutions is reaching a breaking point, and the first signs of a different kind of war, a war of the ledger, are beginning to show on the horizon. The grand halls of the old world are no longer silent. They are filled with the frantic whispers of a paper empire that has finally realized its leash is broken. In the elegant boardrooms of Paris and the clinical offices of the international financial institutions, the birth of the new currency for the Alliance of Sahel States is being treated not as an economic update, but as an existential threat. For over half a century, the CFA Franc was the invisible anchor that kept the African economy tethered to European interests. A system where the stability of the former master was bought with the stagnation of the former colony. But as the vaults of the Sahel are filled with the gold of their own soil, that anchor is being dragged into the depths of history. The reaction from the international community is a study in calculated panic. They speak through the media of risk and volatility, warning that a currency without a Western guarantor is a ship without a sail. But these warnings ring hollow in the ears of those who have seen their wealth evaporated by inflation and their reserves frozen by the whims of foreign courts. The old world is trying to guard a door that has already been kicked open. They know that the success of this gold-backed revolution will provide a blueprint for the rest of the continent, a contagious spark of sovereignty that could end the era of monetary paternalism forever. In Washington, the response is one of strategic pragmatism. The United States, ever watchful of its own position in the global race for resources, is beginning to understand that the old ways of dictated diplomacy are failing. They are witnessing a fundamental shift where the defined boundaries of influence are being redrawn by the fierce independence of the Sahelian heartland. At the center of this financial storm stands Ibrahim Traoré, a leader who has turned the ledger into a shield and the coin into a statement of war. By refusing to play by the rules of a game designed for his defeat, he has forced the global powers to consider a world where Africa is a partner to be negotiated with, rather than a client to be managed. This is a war without bullets, but the stakes are higher than any battlefield. It is a battle for the soul of the African market and the right of a people to define their own value. The international institutions are drafting their sanctions and preparing their legal challenges, but they are fighting against a tide that is as old as the earth itself. The world is learning that the democracy mirage and the stability mirage were only as strong as the silence of the people. And now that silence has been replaced by the rhythmic clinking of gold and the steady pulse of a nation that has finally found its own rhythm. But as the diplomatic cables are signed and the global markets react with trembling hands, a sense of cold anticipation settles over the region. The empire will not go quietly into the night, and the first strikes of the financial counter-offensive are already being felt at the borders of our prosperity. The horizon over the Sahel is no longer a limit, it is a promise. As the Alliance of Sahel States prepares to step into a new financial dawn, the roadmap ahead is clear, yet challenging. This is not merely about changing the name on a banknote, it is about rewriting the genetic code of an entire economy. For the people of Burkina Faso, the path forward is a journey of unyielding self-reliance, where the value of a citizen's sweat is protected by the strength of the national vault. The transition is a marathon of sovereignty, a steady climb away from the valley of debt and toward the summit of true economic power. The risks remain as sharp as the thorns of the acacia tree. To walk away from a colonial currency is to invite the cold wind of financial isolation and the calculated pressure of global markets that fear a sovereign Africa. There will be moments of turbulence, where the resilience of the local market will be tested, and where the Sierra or the Sahel must prove its worth against the oldest currencies in the world. But these risks are the price of a dignity that cannot be bought. The transition government has already begun the work, reinforcing the internal pillars of the economy by processing our own gold and investing in the food security of our own people. We are planting the seeds of a system that serves the farmer in the field before it serves the banker in a distant city. The opportunities are as vast as the savannah itself. A unified currency across Mali, Niger, and the land of upright men creates a regional engine of trade that is immune to foreign manipulation. It opens a door for a new generation of African entrepreneurs to build empires without the fear of their savings being evaporated by decisions made in Paris or Washington. By choosing trade over aid, the nation is inviting partners who see our resources as assets, not as leverage. This is the future of the Sahel, a future where our gold stays in our vaults, our uranium powers our own light, and our currency reflects the true value of our upright character. The message to the world is simple. The era of the paper empire is finishing, and the era of the sovereignty of the soil has begun. Whether the global institutions choose to respect this new reality or try to undermine it, our direction is set. We are walking toward a harvest of our own making, guided by the vision of Ibrahim Traoré and the collective courage of millions who refuse to be tenants in their own land. This is the birth of a new African power, a power that is backed not by foreign permission, but by the solid gold of our earth and the unshakable will of our people. As the first gears of the new central bank begin to turn, we realize that we are not just changing money. We are changing the soul of the continent. The road is steep, the climb is hard, but for the first time in history, the keys to the future belong to us. The sun is setting on the era of the paper empire, and a new dawn of golden sovereignty is rising over the Sahel. The birth of this new currency is not merely a financial transaction, it is a profound declaration that the African soul is no longer for sale. In the heart of Burkina Faso, the people have proven that true wealth is not found in the vaults of a distant master, but in the soil beneath their feet and the unyielding dignity of their own character. They have traded the chains of the CFA Franc for the wings of economic freedom, proving that a nation that owns its money truly owns its future. This is the end of the long wait. Under the visionary guidance of Ibrahim Traoré, the land of upright men has shown the world that the stability of dependency was only a cage in disguise. By backing their destiny with the gold of their own minds and the grit of their own hands, they have created a fortress of prosperity that no foreign power can easily tear down. The message to the rest of the continent is loud and clear. If the Sahel can break the ultimate chain of the colonial legacy, then the light of financial independence is within reach for every nation that dares to reach for it. We stand at a turning point in history. The mirrors of the past have been shattered, and the image reflecting back is one of power, pride, and infinite potential. Burkina Faso is no longer a pupil in a foreign school of economics. It is the architect of a new African reality. The harvest of freedom is no longer a distant dream. It is a reality that you can hold in your hand and feel in your heart. The era of being a laboratory for others is over. The era of the sovereign partner has begun. The road ahead is wide, and the light of this new morning is blindingly bright. We must ask ourselves, if the heart of Africa is finally beating to its own rhythm, what stops the rest of the world from joining the dance? The gold of the Sahel is not just in the ground. It is in the spirit of every citizen who says no more to the shadows of the past. If this vision of a free and prosperous Africa inspires you, do not leave. Subscribe and walk with us as we witness the birth of a new dignity. Stand with the revolution of the soil and help us carry this light to the ends of the earth. Thank you for watching, and thank you for standing with the truth.